Jake, the hallmark of her vice presidency frankly, until the Dobbs decision was that she was dismissed and underestimated. And even now, some Biden aides are saying that they didn't treat her the way that they should have. And the theme of this speech was that she's an underdog. The theme of the speech was, don't underestimate America, don't underestimate all of us. And that is her story. That is her story in the brief 4 years that we have seen her picked by President Biden, and in the 4 weeks since she has been a candidate for president in her own right. And I will just say, it was striking on the substance of this, how much policy there was, how much populist policy there was on economics, and how forceful she was on the foreign policy of it all. Very, very hawkish.
I think if there's one thing that we know about Kamala Harris is that voters don't feel like they fully understand her. She has not actually been in the public eye in elected office on the political side for quite that long. So she's relatively new to this, and I felt like this speech was really filling out some of the contours of who she is as a person. And I do think she's been very misunderstood politically for quite some time. In the primary in 2020, she had to run to the left. But when I covered her then, I spoke to a lot of people who covered her in her Senate race and in the years before she even became a politician in the true sense. They view her in a very different way, as a pretty pragmatic person, as somebody who has progressive beliefs but is not an ideologue. And this part of her speech really struck out to me. She says she would be a president who is realistic, practical, and has common sense. And I think that if there's anything in this speech that she wanted to convey that would cut against the narrative that is being written about her by Republicans, is that she is interested in solving problems. She is interested in not just doing what the left or the right says you should be on in terms of the ideological sides, but what she thinks is the right thing to do. And that was an important message for her to deliver tonight. And I think she has to do that from this point forward, is to help to explain to people not just what does she believe, but how does she think about the decisions that she makes.
And of course, it's always about a contrast, right, Jake? I mean, this is her introduction, as you put so well, Abby, to filling out the contours of who she is and what she's going to do. She treats Donald Trump as a threat to democracy, as a threat to the word freedom she uses over and over again. And other opponents, whether it's been in his primaries or running against him in a general election, have treated him a little bit more of a joke. And she said in this speech that he's not a serious man, but you have to take it seriously. And that clearly is going to frame the next 70 plus days.
The speech was infused with patriotism from the beginning to the end. She also noted, quote, "I know there are people of various political views watching tonight, and I want you to know I promise to be a president for all Americans. You can always trust me to put country above party and self, to hold sacred America's fundamental principles, from the rule of law to free and fair elections, to the peaceful transfer of power." She was attempting to demonstrate that her patriotism is quite a contrast from that of her opponent. Anderson?
Rhetoric at times was muscular. She talked about being a prosecutor, a commander-in-chief, tempered with compassion, saying a harm against any one of us is a harm against all of us. She went on to say we are all in this together. And toward the end, talking about a lesson her mother, she says, used to teach, which was never let anyone tell you who you are. You show them who you are. Tonight, she wanted to show America who she believes she is on this stage tonight. David Axelrod?
Yeah, look, I mean, that was a great speech. I think it was a great speech. She met the moment. She told her own story compellingly. She told it in the sort of in the context of the larger American story in a way that everyone could relate to. She spoke to the struggles of middle-class people and her desire to do things to help, which I think will resonate a lot with folks in a country where that is continuing to be a concern. She hit the right themes on national security and personal security. You know, I think that and the biggest thing is, think back 4 weeks to the speech we heard in Milwaukee and how discordant and negative and divisive it was. And this was a unifying speech. This was a speech in which she asserted, but also demonstrated, a desire to be the president of the entire country.
It would be fascinating to play those speeches side by side.
It really would.
It would be devastating, I think.
You would think so. But if nothing else, the choice is very, very clear here between a unifying candidate who has positioned herself, I think, in the mainstream of American thought and values, and Donald Trump. And I think that was the goal, and they succeeded.
Audie?
I think that we know she's been saying that people have been talking about her as a joyful warrior. We heard more warrior. It was really about projecting strength all the way through. Even her personal story and growing up, they were framed in almost opening arguments, right? Referring to the public as her clients, saying that Donald Trump's client was himself. It actually helped for once, not for once, it helped that she used her biography to the fullest extent, because that was the thing that she was perceived to have struggled with in the past. And here she was presenting that with the foot forward. And I think that it just shows a very interesting sign of growth.
In 2020, there was criticism by some on the left saying Kamala's a cop.
Yes.
There were moments tonight where she stepped very much into that.
This is the Kamala Harris that we know as a. You guys ask the question: how does some kid from, you know, the Bay Area who's multiracial and all these different things climb to the very top of American politics? Because she is that tough, she is that smart. Who would have thought it would take a multiracial woman from a blended family to remind America what real patriotism is and how it works and how it functions? Could you see her as a commander-in-chief? That was what she had to prove. You could see her as commander-in-chief. You could see her facing down Putin. If you're a dictator on the world stage right now, you should be very, very nervous that this woman is going to be in the White House. She is going to be a tough, tough partisan defender of freedom.
John King?
Anderson, two ways to look at it. Let me start with what I think is the smaller piece of it, at least tonight, the policy part of it. What were her weaknesses coming into this speech? Trump polls better than she does on the economy, on immigration. She presented this, let's get housing, let's get jobs, let's help workers, let's do middle class. Republicans will push her, how are you going to pay for it, all of that, but she made an affirmative case for how I can help the middle class grow. On immigration, she mocked Trump for pulling away from the bipartisan border deal, said I'll sign that deal, but I'll also go back to us being a nation of immigrants with strong border security. Again, she'll have to defend this in the 75 days to come, but she tried to address in a forceful way her two biggest weaknesses on policy. Bigger, I think, though, as people have discussed, was the contrast we have now. A Biden-Trump race was a race between, two older men that much of America didn't want. You have a very clear choice after this speech tonight, especially after listening to Donald Trump in Milwaukee. Optimistic, an American dream, an American journey, let's come together, a unifying speech. Her challenge tonight was to prove she could be a credible center-left president. The incoming I'm getting from Republicans say, a lot of them think, at least with this speech, she did just what she had to do.